When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's tracwire.com. This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, I'm here with LT Corey Williams. Corey, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think it's strange. I wonder how many years we've been social media connected. We work in the same region. I've known your name. I've had people nod to you and the work that you're doing for quite a while. But finally, we've messaged, and finally we're actually talking today, probably 7 years later.
Yeah, I think we've actually probably crossed paths a few times, maybe in the jiu-jitsu world, and maybe even rolled together years ago at one point.
I don't know. If it was years ago, it was the basic stuff, like academy stuff for me.
Gotcha. Okay.
I've only dipped my toe really. Are you still active with that?
Not really. I'm kind of in those blue belt blues right there. So I kind of consider myself like a fifth degree white belt. But I try to whenever I can. It's just less and less with work life demands.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fantastic. I mean, you clearly do a lot. We're going to be talking about not just policing, but mental health in your experience as counselor, full-fledged. And so to balance that in an administrative role in the police department, that's a lot, man. I don't know a lot of people doing that actively. I know some people that transition. It's, more one or the other. So what is that like balancing all that? Because I know a lot of listeners are, they're go-getters and they're trying to manage this quote unquote illusion of work-life balance. And then you have two works essentially.
Right. Yeah, it's really challenging. And I couldn't do it without a supportive family. And I don't think I'd be able to do it earlier in life. I'm just kind of at this stage. Both of my boys are adults and they're grown. So I don't even think I would have tried this. But just this weekend, I worked 32 hours of overtime from Friday, 14-hour days, Saturday, Sunday. And then I have clients here in a couple hours after this. So, when I have these long kind of operational periods, it's checking in with myself. How am I doing this? What's working? What's not? And, recently this year, now that I'm fully licensed, have my own practice, it gives me a lot of the autonomy and the flexibility I need. And right now, kind of in the summer, there's a lull because, I work with first responders. They're also busy. Next month, I imagine that'll pick up as my operational tempo kind of winds down. So it kind of works. Until it doesn't. And then I have to kind of start setting boundaries and something has to give or I'll prioritize, family versus either of these two jobs. But yeah, it's challenging. I don't do it alone.
Yeah. I love the nod to family. I think that could be shouted from the mountaintops. It is, I can't think of an actual anecdotal example that I know of where someone's maintained, I'd say a healthy, successful, productive, effective policing career without a strong support. And it doesn't necessarily mean the rah-rah police family, but it is someone that's extremely accommodating, understanding, really high effective communication within the family unit.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that communication is everything. I've been married 23 years. And I see that in my clinical work. And, we all have to kind of balance how we communicate with our significant others and maybe what they can handle and how much we can let them in or what we're comfortable with. And I see where that's not established or that's not really in place. That's kind of just another added stressor in that work-life demand and relationships.
Yeah. There's so much I want to ask you, and we do have a few prongs that we're going to hit specifically with types of conversations that law enforcement is not talking enough about. We've kind of dipped our toe in a couple of these, but when we were bouncing some ideas and you presented them, like they really like grabbed me. And so before we get into that, though, I do want to ask you, like, can you give us a little bit of background into your policing career, but then also like the mental health space, and can you even
Sure.
track back what was of a higher interest to you as you were growing up or coming into adulthood?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I've been very fortunate. I've had a good, rewarding, diverse career. It's had its challenges. It's had its setbacks. I never really wanted to be a cop. Never. I was not one of these guys that grew up wanting to be a cop. It never really occurred to me. When I was in the Navy prior to this, I was on a boarding team and doing a lot of like non-compliant visit board search and seizure training, some kind of retired kind of special forces and law enforcement guys. And I had so much fun on the tactics side doing that.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this could be a job. And ended up transitioning out of that. I was a volunteer firefighter very, very briefly. And getting into law enforcement, especially like where I worked, mental health was just kind of everything. And it just fascinated me. And I loved going to those calls and I loved just trying to figure out all of that. I'd go through all the different CIT trainings. And every time I would do that, there was just kind of this gnawing, like I should go into this. I should
Mm.
do more about this. But to get into this field, to go through the internship and grad school, it was never feasible. Even stuff like when I went through the force science certification course, there's a lot of like psychology stuff in that, and
Yeah.
it kept gnawing, kept gnawing, kept gnawing. And it was during the riots of 2020, and it was one of the last nights of the riot. There was a couple people I saw. One of my coworkers who'd been on 20 plus years just kind of had this look on his face, and then I saw it in younger officers who are on fresh off of probation, that same kind of look. And it hit me that this profession has changed and it's going to take a decade to recover from this. And it's going to affect us. It's going to affect our families. It's going to affect the communities. And it was this vocational calling to go into this. I was already, I had some couple months left on my GI Bill. I was already enrolled in a graduate program through UC Irvine and like a law enforcement psychology kind of overlap thing. And I immediately changed that to go into counseling. From day one there during the riots, I knew I wanted to open a private practice dedicated to first responders and
Wow.
focusing on trauma. And this will be my transition out of law enforcement 6 years from now. So now I'm
Yeah.
just trying to figure out how to do both. I've been very, very fortunate. I got involved with the West Coast Post Trauma Retreat, and I do a lot of volunteer work for them. I volunteer with Code 4 Northwest, just kind of meeting the right people along the path. And through that, I ended up interning at, and then later working at a private practice out in Port Orchard, where all we did was first responders, and everything just worked out the whole way. And the timing was just very perfect. And
Yeah.
I put the work in, and here we are, still going along.
Yeah, that's fantastic. 2020, yeah, that rocked. I mean, that rocked the world. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even more so in the U.S., even more so in cities like I'll say just big cities, and I'll say West Coast policing.
Mm-hmm.
For all of us that were in it or coming in, or a lot of people made their quicker than planned exit out of policing. Very understandably. So with 2020, were you a sergeant then? I'm trying to track back, like when we first started getting connected, and if you were in peer support, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I'm still a sergeant now. I'm kind of in an acting role. I'm probably going to promote here in 3-4 weeks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I've been in peer support I don't know, 10 plus, I forget when it was fairly early in my career. We had a
Yeah.
line of duty death early on. And then given the nature of where I work with the hospitals in the area, we kind of became like de facto hospital response team. But yeah, really after 2020 that took off, I was a sergeant during that time, doing our prisoner processing use of force review during the riots.
Hmm. Yeah, that was as I said, a rough time, but I also appreciate the nod. And whether people were around during those years or not, like there's so much opportunity that people took on as like a catalyst for change, right? A challenge,
Mm-hmm.
a growth period. And I hear that very much in you in redefining a lot of these values of purpose and like what you wanted to do, what you recognized with this need that you wanted to serve in, this capacity to serve in. And maybe that's where we'll get into the first prong, and that's over identity. And we talk about over identity often, and this is something that I grapple with at times because I also wonder if there is a degree of it where you kind of have to toggle it on, like this oversaturation of the work and the career to be effective. But then I would also quickly posit like, hey, you got to like regulate it and refocus it, right? Like counterbalance it quickly when you have the opportunity, because you're right, like you were just talking about your long shifts, your long days. um it can't be this cookie cutter, hey, I finished my 10-hour shift, peace out, no matter what happens. Like the job doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's really challenging, and I think it's gotten more challenging in these last 5 years. And I think back to like day one of the academy. They're saying it's important to have non-responder friends, and I think
Mm.
even Gil Martin mentions it in emotional survival for law enforcement, and uh, and I've kind of done. I'd like to think I've done a good balance with that. But like a lot of us, I've lost friends after the riots, just given the
Hmm.
nature of our work and kind of what happened through society. And it's a lot of even non-responders have moved out of this region to other places. So we've had friends moving away, and it's tough these last 5 years. Kind of who else really gets it, and then this is one of the few professions where we actually put on this uniform and we put on this new persona so we can go out in the world and be very effective.
Hmm.
And it's hard to leave that and take it off when we get home. And then what I really see is when people are moving into retirement. I'm no longer a cop. I'm no longer a firefighter. I'm no longer a medic, whatever it is. And they're kind of like, well, who am I? I've been doing this 20, 30 years. And then there's a huge struggle often with trying to find authenticity and who they are. And, that's kind of going back to values. That's where I help people realign with what's important to them and find different ways to move toward those values.
Yeah, you put it so well when you're like literally putting on this uniform and this persona. And a lot of listeners are newer, so they're gonna hear that in a certain way. But then also for people that have been in the saddle for a while, like 5, 10 years plus, um, I think that might escape us a lot of times when if you actually take some pause and you think about what your expectation is when you're interacting with just a general stranger, when you're in uniform, when you're on duty versus when you're not. And if you take a moment and think about that, I would suggest people do that. There's a huge difference, and then how that can manifest in the pressure you put on. Personally, if I'm just walking around and I try not to go to the grocery store very often in uniform on shift, even to get a snack or whatever. But because you have to be really on, like I feel like you have to be really polite. You have to be carrying yourself well. You also have to be vigilant if a crime is occurring. You have to also be vigilant if someone's about to exact a crime on you, which is very much a thing. But I don't have that in general life. Yeah, I don't walk around in the quote unquote white where I don't think anything's going to happen. But it's very, very different. What are your thoughts on those dynamics as we carry out this job more and more?
Yeah, it's so I think back very early in my career, my wife came out and did a ride along while I was not with me, but with somebody else in my
Hmm.
squad. And her biggest takeaway, well, a couple of them, she was just shocked at what we deal with. And she thought she knew, and she hears stories, and then to see it firsthand. Um, but she just noted how uncomfortable it was that everybody stared at us anywhere we
Mm.
go. You're riding around in a marked patrol car and in a uniform, everybody sees you, and we're the most visible form of government out there. And then I've had experiences where I've made a contact for whatever. And at the end of my shift, and then I change out and I'm like walking home or, walking the bus or whatever. And I've sat next to the guy that I just contacted 30 minutes ago.
Oh my
He
gosh.
doesn't even recognize me
Yeah.
because I'm out of uniform. It's just this different world. And then when I transitioned into kind of a more plain clothes, quasi undercover role, that was an interesting adjustment where it's like, oh, we're too close. They can see me. And if we're mobiling somebody, it's like, oh no, they don't know.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
this very interesting kind of, oh wow, like this really does frame so much of what we do in like in a daily throughout our life, right? Like, and it alters for better or worse, our perception of us in the world, the community, the world around us, society, everything.
Yeah, that's so funny. And for those that are newer to it or coming in, yeah, what Corey means is like if you walk around like a cop in plain clothes, you're going to stand out. Like if you try to keep your distance around people and blade your stance towards people, whereas like people just walk around, and that's like it's just the ironic, goofy thing about blending in is you got to think actively about what makes you not stand out.
Yeah.
With over identity, you mentioned values, and I think that's a key thing, and making it more about who you are and how you do things rather than like the technical what you do. And the thing I'd like to throw out is role over rank, and oftentimes that's in the capacity of the job, but we could also expand that out to life. And if my role is to be a protector and like a good role model and someone that lives with my values and virtues and is a helper and as a teacher, well, that absolutely doesn't have to be as a cop. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Or do you have certain tools or kind of thought processes that you like to suggest people think about when they recall back to values as they think about over identity and perhaps even like transition out or away from the job? Because that is a growing conversation very much in our space, is people recognizing they have to retire at some point, but being pretty averse towards like leaning into that recognition.
Yeah. So kind of more clinically, my primary framework is it's a theory, it's acceptance and commitment therapy. So I work a lot with values. I'm really values driven in helping people connect with those. And I find that in such a noble, honorable profession, we often don't think of values. Like they're just kind of given to us. Maybe guys from the military have their, here's your values, or maybe you were in scouts or something growing up and here's your values. And we don't actually put names to them. There is an exercise I usually do in my second sessions with people is we identify what is important to them. And there's different ways to do that. But one of the most effective ways I like to do it is tell me when you're living your best. Like, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? And then what we can do is extract values from those. And then we can also look at your values and then extract what we call committed action, things to do to move toward your values in that sense. And a lot of it's just kind of looking at it differently, kind of stepping back and trying to really understand it. Values are often mistaken for goals. Like we never will accomplish our values. Like there's never a day where you're like, I've loved my family enough. I've taught enough people, or like I'm fit enough. Right. Yeah. We're always just moving towards those. And I think that's a really good way. So, I mean, if I don't know, in this region, people like to get outdoors, whether it's kayaking, mountain biking, hiking, whatever the thing is, right? Like jujitsu, working out. It's like, well, what do you like about that? Is it being out in nature? Is it the camaraderie you feel with different people? Is it the physical activity? And we start to, those are values. We start to identify those. And so many of those we get in first responder world, right? So then we start to, there's a lot of hobbies that are kind of like adjacent to our jobs, and there's a place for it, and it's great. I'm not telling people not to do it. Like some guys are really into 3-gun shooting or jujitsu and stuff like that. Like that's great. Keep doing those. And we need to find other ways that are definitely not adjacent to work, where you can still do those and find creative outlets for that, or just new ways that are separate from it. Because at the end of this career, when you've put everything into this, you're not going to know what to do with these. And it's going to leave you kind of in this despair and I don't know who I am. And, I'm a big fan of identifying those values and even setting annual goals, checking in monthly, quarterly, weekly, all of that. And sometimes values change slightly, maybe not the values don't change, but like 2020, right? The world changes around us. How can we change how we're moving toward those values? That's really what I mean more.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, the career adjacent thing I think is very healthy to think about, right? Because we do recognize the power of having friends outside and hobbies outside of the profession. And it's not like to say like, oh, it's bad that you have friends that are cops. Absolutely not. Like I have some of my best friends are, but it's just part of that thing and that recognition where, I've shared different elements of kind of hopping into jujitsu later in career and, not super young, and then back out of it now. But part of that is like, I realized, I anecdotally, I was like, well, I've never been more injured and more sick during those times. Cause, it was like winter season and flu season. Everyone's like breathing on each other in close proximity. So this is not to turn people off from the idea. It's very much, if you're an active street cop, like please do it as much as you, like even like once a week, like please try that. Cause I believe in it. But it is to say that when I hopped in, I was like the cop at the gym, and it's kind of strange to not have a lot more cops. I suppose there are a couple firefighters and such, and there's like a new guy coming in. But I also felt like, again, because people knew what I did, I felt like I had to represent. And then I was in my late 30s rolling with like these early 20-year-olds at 5 a.m, and I felt like I had something to prove, even though I'm like, oh yeah, check the ego tap early. But I still didn't want to be like a slouch, like a training slouch. And I ended up, pushing it for more than I should have, especially like when my body and brain wasn't super awake. So that is maybe just a long-winded way of saying, like, know your intention and your purpose and be patient with it. And like, is it a hobby? Is it a form of fitness, or is it like an extension of your DT training? And maybe one would be a lot more better suited for like what you're trying to achieve than the other.
And it can be all of those things, and that it can change over time. I mean, some guys really want to get into like competition. I competed a few times just because I was in an admin job, and I'm like, if I'm going to be holding officers accountable for use of force, like I should probably go do it. I'm not on the street anymore at that time. So I'm just going to go into a competition, like just see what that's like. And yeah, a lot of injuries. I mean, I have like an injured finger right there, and it's this give and take. And that there's training 4 or 5 days a week. That was years ago. That's I'm lucky to get that in a couple months. So
yeah, what I hear is just chapters and maybe phases. Because just because you start something doesn't mean like that's just like what you have to do for the rest of your life, or even what you should do. And I think should is kind of a tricky concept to grapple with, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. Okay, the second prong that we want to hit on. So you called it covert depression. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So when you and I were kind of first talking about this, I had just read a book by Terrence Real, and I wrote down here. It's about covert depression. So that was very fresh on my mind. And as I read that, it's really covert depression in men. And as I'm reading kind of more into it, it really overlaps with so many in the like first responder world. And, we think of depression and we think of, oh, I'm sad and just kind of down. But often in men, especially in covert depression, the way that we can mitigate it or mask it or avoid it or hide it is it really shows up as not sadness, but irritability and anger and aggression. And, we can see masking this in behavioral changes where we become more increased risk, whether that's, reckless driving fast. On the far end of the spectrum, you might see that in alcohol use, drug use, porn addiction, sex addiction, promiscuity, infidelity, things like that. And our families or our coworkers around us might notice it more as withdrawal, kind of just pulling away from others. And feelings can be difficult. Feelings can be complicated. So, we like to think, well, I only have two feelings. I'm like angry and confusion, right? But there's this whole other kind of spectrum out there. That's
a sad scope. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see it, amongst our coworkers and within this field. So we just like we compartmentalize stuff. And so it's a double-edged sword. Like we we have to compartmentalize some of these bigger feelings, and because it's what gives us our edge when we go and handle these calls. Like we have to be able to kind of compartmentalize them, shove them down. There's an analogy I like to use where it's like holding a beach ball, right? And you have to kind of hold it underwater. And if you just let that go, it doesn't just float to the surface. It violently comes up and we don't know where it's going. It could hit us in the face or, go somewhere else. And like shoving down our emotions are like that. It's okay to do that every once in a while, but we have to unpack it later. And we're really, really good as first responders of convincing ourselves that we will unpack it later. So then what we might start to notice is headaches, irritability, or I'm sorry, like not irritability, but like digestion issues, stress, muscle tension, dizziness, headaches, things like
aches
that.
And pains, right? Because that manifests in the body too.
Right. So and it's challenging too, because a lot of those, for anybody that's familiar, those kind of overlap within the trauma world. And we know that we're exposed to a lot of trauma. So this can often get overlooked, especially with providers or clinicians who are not culturally competent or who don't really understand kind of some of this. And it's easy to just dismiss this as something else or overlook it, or even for like our coworkers or anybody, that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just irritable. I'm just tired, whatever it is. I just have this headache and I don't have depression. I don't need help. I don't need to see a therapist. I don't need to see a counselor. And then relationships are falling apart. And then this shows up in, work performance and discipline and all of that.
Yeah. This is really striking a chord with me because in some recent writing and even an episode, I was talking about just feeling down, and it kind of jarred me. Like it might not, I feel like it probably wouldn't jar like the average non-responder, as you call them, to be like, yeah, sometimes you're down. But I think because we're so task oriented, we're busy, we have all these priorities. My default, for sure, you don't need to ask my wife, I'll just tell you, is irritability, right? And so when you say that, like it hits in a spot where I'm like, not proud of it, but that is a default for me, is like irritability. Like when I come home, it's, it's being short. It's being just kind of just like pissy, right? Just being like just petty, pissy, whatever, impatient with my family, which is, again, a lot of admission because I think it is a common thing. Whereas like when I felt down, it's more fewer far between. Like in a year, I could probably count like on one hand, like times I was like, oh yeah, I felt super dejected and just kind of like, what am I doing?
Sure.
But yeah, irritability all the time. What are the things that you suggest people kind of work through if they can identify that in themselves?
Well, I think identifying it is huge. That's actually one of the things that we work on is what we call present moment awareness of when that stuff shows up. And it's challenging sometimes to, when I do trainings outside of like kind of the clinical side, but I challenge, like I'll do a debrief. And one of the things I'll lead with finish with the debrief is to look after each other. I mean, cops and firefighters spend more time together often than they do with their families. And we know when our coworkers are just not right, and to listen when somebody calls us out on it, to listen to those closest to us, like our spouses or family members, when they're telling us that we're being irritable, when we're being just off. Right. And like, some of the serious things, if this does show up as like substance abuse, we have to go after those symptoms. And maybe that's clinically, maybe that's working with a therapist, or, maybe it is going inpatient somewhere. If it's, kind of on that far end of the spectrum, maybe it's just taking a break, right? Like we need, cause one of the other things we're really good at avoiding this is working too much. And there's often endless overtime, and it's culturally acceptable to work hard and to keep showing up and working.
Yeah.
And maybe we need a break, and maybe we need a long break. Maybe it's more than a couple days, or, take a week or two off. I know that's more challenging if you're newer in your career and you don't have those days. You kind of feel like you're missing out. But often, I think with responders, sitting in stillness and sitting and doing nothing and allowing yourself to do nothing just even talking about that gives people anxiety. If
I default there a lot. Yeah.
I'll challenge people, drive home in silence. Drive home in silence and do exactly the speed limit. Like, see what comes up, because there's going to be something to work with there.
Yeah, that's huge. And I have suggested people sometimes, like, because I was and still kind of edged towards this, where it's like, yeah, I gotta be listening to a podcast and or like working out at the same time and trying to think of all these to-dos, and I'll be thinking about work, and I'll have an idea and I'll put it down on a note like, oh yeah, that's a good idea for work. And then I'll think about a blue grid idea and I'll like, oh yeah, so I'll stop. And I'm like, no, too much. And sometimes it is like assigning myself like I'm going to listen to some music that I really enjoy or listen to nothing, which was hard for a while,
Yeah.
especially if you don't do that, if you aren't left with your thoughts. But that is how you can have the opportunity to identify a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how challenging it can be, because I was very aware of this when I mean, there was a period within the last 5 years where I was in grad school. I was doing my internship. I was filling the role of an acting lieutenant and 2 sergeant spots all at once.
Oh
And
my
that's
gosh,
just
yeah.
not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I was kind of having this conversation with somebody, and it occurred to me, like, I used to like listening to music, but I don't really do that anymore if I'm not working out or
Oh, that's a
driving
Gil
the car
Martin
or
used
whatever.
to, as he calls
Exactly.
them. Yeah.
Yes. And I was like, man, wasn't the last time I just sat and listened to an album and did nothing but just listen to it?
Mm.
And that was kind of not a wake up call, because it really wasn't, but I challenged myself to do it. It was hard and harder than I thought. And now it's kind of one of my go-to things. I love it. I'm starting to buy more stuff on vinyl, and I just kind of have this whole system now, and I'll just sit and listen to records like an old man, I guess.
No, I think that's pretty badass. And a couple reasons is that, if we're listening to music and it's like Spotify playlist or this rate blank radio, and then it becomes not being present because it becomes skipping the song into the song that you think you want to hear. Whereas like when I hear you say listen to an album and then you specified vinyl, no, you're listening, like you're not moving around, you're listening to it. It is like its own work of art in the process, listening for like an hour and a half or whatever, that whether it's 45 minutes, whatever the duration is. It's almost like, how often does someone actually sit down and like watch a movie from start to finish? Like, put your phone over there, like be with your person or be by yourself or with your buddy and just watch them from start to finish. Like, I mean, we watch chunks of movies all the time, and it's just a different process. And I'm not saying like you can't enjoy chunks of movies, but it is just a different attention and presence. And like that is the process and the exercise of these things that many of us really love, whether it's movies or carving out some time to actually sit down and read, but not looking at your phone every,
Right.
10 minutes when someone texts you like a meme, right? Like it's just a different experience.
Well, I think there's something to agency in that too. I mean, like, yeah, you can listen to Spotify and the algorithm's feeding it to you. Versus like, I'm going to go seek out a specific album or even just a song, and I'm just going to do this. And I think it's really easy to let the algorithm, whatever that is, let technology just kind of catch us and let us drift through life and not be moving toward those values, or just kind of not really checking in on how we're doing. And that can be avoidance too. Anything can be avoidance.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up avoidance as like another flavor of that, because that's what I was thinking as you're presenting them as well, which is, we recognize in the fire industry a lot of times you're just with a crew and you go in the truck and then you go back and you eat and you go work out. Like, sure, you can have your own time, but it's very easy for cops to isolate outside of the calls and like in between calls just to like find a parking lot or go back here and just avoid people. And so it is so key to have that peer support element, or that peer, I suppose, like checking in culture, where you notice when someone is just not around a whole lot. You're saying, hey, let's go get coffee. And then this person that used to go is not anymore. And, being proactive to those kinds of those things that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Number 3, you call it spiritual bypassing. And I love how you go farther into to describe that. Can you introduce that concept? Because I don't know if I've heard that phrase in this context before.
Yeah. So I came across that like when I was learning mindfulness and kind of how to teach and coach mindfulness, where like I just said, anything can become avoidance. So there's this tendency in, I think specifically the mindfulness world where this comes from, is that this wellness practice that we do to feel better actually becomes this, we bypass all of our problems because we think, well, I'm doing this as like a spiritual thing, so this is more important. And that becomes avoidance. Like I don't want to say weaponize it, because we're often not even aware that we're doing it, but like it goes beyond that. And throughout the wellness culture, throughout the first responder wellness culture, we're we're often seeking, if I can just find this perfect protocol, if I can do the perfect, the minimum effective dose of cold plunges or breath work or
Yeah.
meditation or whatever it is, then my problems will be solved. So then now we're just really kind of avoiding all of this other stuff because, well, I'm doing wellness, I'm taking care of myself. This is self-care. And we're not really checking in. We're just kind of going through the motions doing that. And kind of like anything, I mean, you can eat to excess. You can have eating disorders on the other end. You can work out to excess. Anything can be maladaptive. Anything can be avoidance. And I'm starting to see a lot more of that in the first responder wellness kind of culture. And it ends up leading us, like it gives us this false sense of control. If I can only do these things, then I can control things, which really then just makes the stress and anxiety that much worse. And it's treating us as if we're a problem. Like, we're like a machine. Like I can just do preventative maintenance and I'll be fine. But we're not problems to be solved. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is like this mystery to be lived and experienced, and trying to unpack all of that.
Yeah, and what you just said is almost like a nod to what you said earlier, which is like you don't just get done. It's not like wellness achieved, cool. Like I
Right.
just sit in that like space now. It's a continual thing. Like we get older, we need to. I think most people will recognize like a necessity, not just a desire, but a necessity to adjust how you work out. How you spend your time, your discretionary time when you have a kid. Hopefully that changed rather than when you're like just a single dude or gal. I'm snickering as you say all this because this was me, and it's always a work in progress, right? But it just shows like how do you optimize, right? And this is where the biohacking sphere that is not new, but I feel like it's all these little biohacking type of conversations are much more mainstream now. You mentioned cold plunging and different supplements and adaptogens, and then like the best way to work out for longevity and all these conversations, like, great speakers and resources in the space. But now it becomes this overwhelm, especially I believe pervasive to our types of personalities, which are like go go go, okay, more, and I'm going to fine tune this to like the perfect thing where I'm going to get up at this many, I'm going to hack my sleep aggressively, right? Like get all the hacks, and then I'm going to wake up at this prime time and I'm going to cold plunge and fast or not fast, or eat this but not that. I personally struggled with a lot of that because I was simply I guess like simply but complicatedly like overworked, fatigued, adding
Mm-hmm.
stress through high intensity workouts and things, and then my sleep was suffering. I've talked about that before, but my attempt to work it was through aggressive diet protocols and something as much as like grounding, right? Grounding, kind of hippy dippy thing, stand barefoot outside. But I would stand outside like in the rain for like 15 minutes because I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting my grounding in. And also I'm going to swing a kettlebell around because I'm not just going to stand here. That's a waste of time.
Right.
Um, Adding in all these things, and because somebody somewhere with some degrees said, yeah, you can push through the discomfort. But my own trying to get mind over matter was like, okay, cool, I'll do the fasting and the keto and the working out and the things because someone somewhere said they could do it and that guy did it. But that guy truly wasn't a cop or a first responder or dealing with all these other things. Also, just like my genetics, right? Who knows? So, like, all to say that I think when you say all that, what I hear is as a need to remove rather than add, right? Like if you're not knowing what it is you're trying to fix, and like adding more is sometimes not the answer. Sometimes it's removing, giving space
Right.
and allowance.
Yeah. Yeah. When I work with my clients, will, I don't give advice, and I challenge them to push back on me if I ever do. Like, I will never say, do this or don't do that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this thing is good or this thing is bad. Um, I'm more interested in helping them see, like, well, how's that working out for you? There's a time and place for all of that. Like cold plunge away, like workout, all of the things, do them here and there, right? I'm not saying like, don't do those things, but how is that working out for you? And then the follow-up question is, are you moving towards your values, or are you moving away from all of the dark and twisties down here that we don't
Hmm.
like because it's been a rough week?
Yeah, I mean, even as you say, like, how is that working out for you? I think most of the time when people are naming all these things, and maybe it's this kind of agitated state of like, I don't know, I'm trying this and this and this and this, and things aren't getting better, or I still have like the big thing that I'm maybe talking to you about or talking to a clinician about. But yeah, such a good prompt. How is that working out for you that anyone can take on for themselves and or
Yeah.
for their loved ones that are coming to them for feedback, advice? As you say, you're trying not to give advice, but just asking back a question with curiosity,
Mhm.
helping people peel that back. I love that.
Yeah, when I ask that, I often immediately will get this laughter and this realization of, yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
So then the follow-up question is like, well, how? Like, what's the cost of this? Because there's a cost to doing it and there's a cost to not doing it. And we can kind of pull that apart. And then again, I start looking at values. And I've gotten feedback that one of the more valuable techniques is even just to ask, am I moving toward who I want to be, or am I moving away from it? And
Mm.
sometimes that's what the spiritual bypassing is. It seems like I'm moving toward it, but this is actually avoidance, and it's becoming this obsession, or it's just becoming maladaptive. And I'm actually moving away from who I want to be.
Yeah, yeah. Is that so? If people are hearing this conversation and like, man, there's a piece of me that's that. However, like, I like the Jocko get after it. I like the idea of getting up early and like mind over matter and like the power of mindset and like extreme discipline, extreme ownership. Um, how do you navigate that difference? Dog just burst in. How do you navigate that difference? Because we don't want to paint ourselves excuses, but some of us like probably do need more toggle off rather than toggle
Mm-hmm.
on.
Well, I mean, it's tough, and because the answer's not the same all the time. And I love Jocko. I listen all of the podcasts. I batch all of this stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, and I'll go through these seasons of doing it. And I think the beginning of that is just asking how how is it working out for you? Because sometimes there is a season where you're like, yeah, I got space, I can do more. Maybe it's an honest conversation where I could improve, and maybe I'm overweight, or like that last call I was winded and I almost couldn't handle that. So like, yeah, wake up early, go work out, go post your pictures at 4:30 in the morning and lift heavy weights and run fast, right?
Hmm.
And again, kind of going back to like, listen to those around you. They'll tell you. If you listen, they'll tell you that this isn't working out, or they'll tell you in ways where it's not explicit, and relationships are falling apart and you're noticing that stress. And just checking in, find more moments to be still, because I think that's really a big part of what we're trying to avoid is, what are the uncomfortable things that show up in those moments of stillness.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a fan of Ryan Holiday. Are you
Mm-hmm.
familiar?
Yeah, the obstacle's the way. That's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, and my wife just got the newer book, might be the newest, but Stillness is the Key. So you say stillness, and that kind
Oh
of
yeah, yeah, for
resonated.
sure.
And at a time and chapter where this year I've been, it's probably just both ends where it's what can I add, how can I up level myself and prime
Mm-hmm.
myself. But at the same time, a lot of it comes back to, well, within reason and pause and taking time. Like, and in reflecting lately, I'm like, man, I'm not the lifestyle isn't what it used to be where I, get up and pound coffee and like sling heavy weights around like
Mm-hmm.
first thing, which there's a chapter of that in my life that I loved about that. But I think it's good to be proud of some things. I'm proud that I journal more than I did. And I
Mm-hmm.
take stock and just pause and kind of wake my mind up a lot of mornings before my body. And I do both. But not quite as long as like slinging the weights around, which
Right,
in this chapter life feels good. So it's an
right.
invitation for those that have trouble with that. Think about it. If that sounds really uncomfortable, if it sounds like a challenge, like I think like most times, explore it more, right? Why is
Right.
that scary? Why is that so uncomfortable?
I think asking yourself, even, why am I doing this? What is my intention here? And
Hmm.
that, even the whole intention thing, that could be kind of watered down too. But really, just having that present moment awareness, and that kind of what we call self as context of like, these are feelings. Like, why am I doing this? And then like giving yourself permission, because sometimes it's actually okay to be sad when things are sad. It's
Yeah.
okay to be upset when things are frustrating or unjust. And we don't like those. So we're like, well, I'm just going to do breathing exercises to make this go away. There's no amount of journaling or breath work or anything that can make the human suffering that we all go bear witness to as a vocation,
Yeah.
It's not going to make it go away, but we can learn to mitigate that and show up kind of in this peak performance as we go forward.
Yeah, that's so good. So many strategies and themes that you present for us to think about. And I know your thing is not to give advice, especially to like unknown people in unknown contexts that are listening in. But I am curious, and I think people would love to hear some of the things that you incorporate into your either daily or weekly routines. Clearly, you're someone that cares about your mental, family, physical health, professional endeavors and responsibilities, and like what are some of the big rocks for you people can think about?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's important that this stuff ebbs and flows, right? Like with work life demands and responsibilities. I think it's very, very important to be proactive with your time off. It's so easy to just go, 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 go. But schedule those vacations, even if it's a weekend, if it's a week, but go do something. Like, don't just sit around and do housework. There's a time to do that, but like actually get that downtime. So I try to be very proactive, scheduling time together with my wife. I do an annual kayaking trip every year in the San Juans. I sometimes semi-annually will do like a mountain biking trip up at Whistler with some of my coworkers. I didn't make it this year. I try to work out as much as I can. My programming is calling for 6 days a week. I think last week I did 2 just because of work. And, like it's really easy to start beating myself up about that.
Mm.
I'm a huge fan of morning pages. I do that. It's just writing 3 pages every day. I've been doing that for, um, I don't know, a couple of years.
Is that from the Artist's
Meditation.
Way?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been meditating, kind of teaching meditation, mindfulness meditation off and on for over 10 years. And, one of my teachers there came up with the terms periodically consistent. There's times where I'll do it every single day, twice a day, 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I haven't sat and meditated in a couple months, and it's just not working or something. Maybe I'll get more out of morning pages. I'm exploring sketching right now,
Mm.
which is, I think, so much of our world in first responders is really left brain analytical problem solving, that I'm trying to kind of balance this out, just explore this creativity, kind of create rather than consuming kind of the algorithm, or just like, what does this look like to mesh this? And, I used to draw and doodle as a kid. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's a perishable skill. And I look at what
Yeah.
I did, I'm like beating myself up. And that's part of it. Just, let it go. I like to get out, and I like getting out in nature. We live in the Northwest, so it's a great area. I'm going to go out on a motorcycle ride this weekend by myself, get away. And I really think that being proactive with that downtime, is whatever that looks like, is key. Find your thing, get out and go do it.
Yeah, I love that. Especially, I'm kind of lining up the couple things where even sketching, doodling, right? That was a big part of my life, and I've dabbled in and out of it. But last night, like I'd already spent quite a amount of time in the last couple of days on blue grit stuff, and then I was like, man, like I just need to use a different part of my brain. It's feeling like a lot like work, and that's like not the goal. Is to all. Sometimes it feels like work for sure, but
Sure.
other times like it should be like fun. But I was like, you know what, like do something totally different. And so my wife actually was going out socializing, like daughter went down, and I was like, I could default to editing episodes, or I could do something totally different. And I bust out a sketch pad,
Mm-hmm.
and then I put on my over ear headphones, which is for me a totally different experience that I've been playing with
Mm-hmm.
more, but just listening like deeply to really intense vocals, and like really just having fun with it, right? Finding new
Yeah.
songs like on albums that just don't, the algorithm does not suggest, right? And so I love that, and I hope that simple thing that people can think about, whether it's a half hour or whatever, um, it there's a lot of ways to look at meditation, and we talk about moving meditation, walking outside. Um, I think for a lot of people, I recognize this for myself. Like meditation was really scary, but think about ways that you can just kind of be in a different space, a different
Mm-hmm.
mindset, or just kind of allow your mind to release some of this super like rigid, I need to do this and that, and work on this
Right.
and that.
Right.
Well, Corey, I love the conversation. I know that there's so much that listeners are going to get and probably have to start sharing with their people. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of leave us thinking about, or in closing, and then where people can find you and get in contact?
Uh, No, not that I can think of. As far as adding
You're like,
anything
I'm
else.
exhausted. I gave you everything.
No, it's just like I'm like looking at the clock and I'm aware that we're coming up on kind of our time. It's like I don't know what to give that's not going to open up, more.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, you can come back. You can come back,
all
man.
right.
Start taking notes.
Yeah, and as far as like, I mean, you can, my private practice is Agate Counseling. You can find me there. It's agatecounseling.com. I'm on Instagram. I mean, I'm not on Instagram, but I'm there, and I've got like a love-hate relationship with social media.
Me too.
I can be reached there, and I'm on Twitter or X, and yeah, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I disappear for months, and then sometimes I'm posting first responder wellness memes 5 times a day.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.